Well, hello there and good day. Thank you so much for joining me at the Dystopian Report, the place where we talk about the nightmare world we have found ourselves in. I'm your host, Jesse Pullman, and we're going to start this episode with a little look at Ariel the Office Cat, because it's a doozy. See, it would be easy for me to talk about Ukraine and our president and vice president and secretary of state being quislings, but, the truth of the matter is, I want to go into someone who's a little bit deeper into this web, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on him. We're reading his Wikipedia as we go, kind of. But this guy is kind of one of the brains behind what's going on with Donald Trump right now. So bear in mind, this might be a little bit longer of an episode than normal. I may stumble over my own words or get lost in places. Please do forgive me. I am an imperfect creature facing off against a guy who, from what I've read so far, is a real concern. Also, just as a programming note, I am working on another dystopian review of the old school style. There's a song I've been wanting to do for a while that I think I finally figured out how to make it engaging for the listener and viewer while explaining the lyrics and their reconciliation and their meaning, or at least going into them a little bit. So let's take a look at this article and let's see if it works right. So this is Curtis Yarvin. Curtis Guy Yarvin was born in 1973. He's also known by the pen name Mencius Moldbug. He's an American blogger. He is known, along with philosopher Nick Land, for founding the anti-democratic and anti-egalitarian philosophical movement known as the Dark Enlightenment. Really, the Dark Enlightenment. I would have come up with that in my 20s. Or Neo-Reactionary Movement, NRX. I know I said that wrong. So Yarvin is, to my mind, one of the intellectual masterminds of MAGA and of the neo-fascist movements that we are facing off against today. Meaning, in a lot of ways, he's scary to me because he's the brains behind the operation. And I know this guy looks like he isn't necessarily the brightest, but he's been effective. And if he's been effective, how can we tell if he's been bright? Now, Ariel the Office Cat is already starting to paw at me and demand my attention. But that means she's working her way up to biting me. So she will attack me. It's only a question of when, because people do attack. Pay attention. So the basic gist is that Yarvin's background began in around 2002 when he began work on a personal software project that became the Urban Network Computer Platform. Do I know what that is? Nope, not a clue. He co-founded some other company, helped lead it, so he's both an intellectual thinker and a Silicon Valley kind of person. And he's influenced a number of prominent Silicon Valley investors and Republican politicians, such as venture capitalist Peter Thiel, who said this was his most important connection. Peter Thiel's a big dude. If this is his most important connection, that means something. Political strategist Steve Bannon read and, quote, admired his work. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance cited Yarvin as an influence himself. There are others, too. Yarvin was even at the Trump inaugural gala. Political said he was an informal guest of honor due to his outsized influence over the Trumpian right. Okay. Now, without going too much into his background, because a lot of it could be guesswork, like, oh, it sounds nice, but maybe it wasn't. His father was a U.S. diplomat. His family has Jewish American and communist ties. He entered Johns Hopkins longitudinal study of mathematically precocious youth. I don't know what that is. It sounds like an early, enrichment thing. In 1988, I was 4, and he was graduating from high school. So that's about the age difference between us, which is interesting to think of. He's a graduate student in a PhD program, but he dropped out to join a tech company. So he sounds like one of those guys who had a pretty well-to-do upbringing, who went on to be Silicon Valley, who went on to make the big bucks in the Silicon Valley Science Department. Cool. Urbit is, in one way, he got funded through Peter Thiel. But this guy's thing is he is a neo-reactionary blogger. we're going to talk now about the Dark Enlightenment. And it has its own Wikipedia article. We're going to switch to it for a second, because it too is not short. And I don't want to go too long and bore you to death, but I do want to give you the gist. So I'm going to take a drink from my I Promise You This Is Green water bottle. It looks black because green screen, black background, you do the math. Yarvin believes the real political power in the United States is held by something he calls the cathedral, an informal amalgam of universities and the mainstream press, which collude to sway public opinion. So the cathedral, very religious theming, that sort of carries on. According to him, a so-called Brahmin class, in reference to the Brahmin social class of India's caste system in the American Boston Brahmin, I don't know what that is. This Brahmin social class dominates American society, preaching progressive values to the masses. So, these Brahmins and these cathedrals, Brahmins are like the priests of the cathedrals, preaching progressive values. This is an extraordinary oversimplification of any conspiracy theory you can get to, but sure, dude, whatever. The socio-religious analogy originates from Yarvin's opinion that progressive ideology of the cathedral is delivered and internalized by the general populace much in the same way religious authorities and institutions deliver religious dogma to fanatical worshippers. Well, yeah, the guy who Christians are supposed to be following was like a progressive. Like, I mean, maybe not for America's time, although that progress today is limited, but, you know, that whole thing is a thing. Hi, Kat. You can tell this is crazy, isn't it? Yes, you can. Good girl. I love you. Seriously, half the reason to make these videos is an excuse to do something kind of venting and to pet a cat. So, you know, cat needs love. I may have said this already, but, you know, if I'm hoping she's doing well. I'm hoping she's losing weight for the right reasons. So, let's skip down a bit. Yarvin argues for neo-cameralist philosophy based on Frederick the Great of Prussia's cameralism, which we can just hover over cameralism. It's the German science of public administration in the 18th and early 19th century, aimed at a strong management of a centralized economy for the benefit mainly of the state. The discipline, in its most narrow definition, is concerned with the management of the state's finances. Cool. Let's get to the key of this whole argument. In Yarvin's view, democratic governments are inefficient. Okay, that might be true. And wasteful, also might be true if you think about it, but maybe not. And should be replaced with sovereign joint stock corporations whose shareholders, i.e. large owners, elect an executive with total power but who must serve at their pleasure. So this is basically like a group of medieval dukes getting together and electing one of their own to be the king. It's almost, to go back to Prussia and Germany and all that, it's almost like the Holy Roman Empire in a lot of ways, where they elect one of their own to be like the next Holy Roman Emperor, and sometimes that's more of a hassle than it is a position of power. The executive, unencumbered by liberal democratic procedures, could rule efficiently, much like a CEO monarch. So you really do have a fusion of corporate ideas of like ownership and a joint stock corporation and government via an all-powerful monarch-like executive. So when Donald Trump says he's the king, this is what he means. He's the king. He's also got himself a prime minister named Elon Musk, but that's another story. What else is there to say? Well, here's the next thing I wanted to talk about. Under his Moldbug, Yarvin gave a talk about rebooting the American government at the 2012 BIL conference. What's the BIL conference? Let's find out real quick. If I can get my hand to behave and hover over the mouse. It's an open, self-organizing emergent arts society thing. Unconference. I don't know what an unconference is, so whatever. He used it to advocate the acronym RAGE, which he defined as Retire All Government Employees. He described what he felt were flaws in the accepted World War II mythology, alluding to the idea that Adolf Hitler's invasions were acts of self-defense. Does that sound like Russia to you, by the way? Think about it. Think about what happened today. It's February 28th. Think about the little diplomatic meeting. I'm not going to give it time when this is coming out. This is going to go on however long it goes on. At this point, I'm pretty committed. And in fact, I want a save point. So I'm going to put a cut in real quick just for fun. End high again. So Yarvin is kind of a fascist and kind of an authoritarian with like glimmers of liberalism or libertarianism for the powerful, but not for really anyone who doesn't have power. In fact, he considers the concept of aligning property rights with political power formalism, which is the formal recognition of realities by the existing power, which should eventually be replaced, in his views, by a new ideology that rejects progressive doctrines transmitted by the cathedral. So the closest thing I can think of to this functioning would be a person with great wealth can command whatever they want because they have great wealth, even if they don't necessarily have to spend or give that wealth. Think how Donald Trump would hire people to do jobs and then not pay them because he'd be like, well, I'm wealthy, you got to work for me. Isn't that great? And it's like, nah, dude, we want to get paid. But you know, there you go. That's how it is, right? The wealthy can do what they want. The weak can't. That's the formal nature of power. It might makes right. It's really messed up. Let's see if we can get some more connections in place. Yarvin's ideas have been influential among right libertarians and paleo-libertarians, and the public discourses of prominent investors like Peter Thiel have echoed Yarvin's project of seceding from the United States to establish tech CEO dictatorships. So you know how like there's a Department of Government Efficiency led by the tech billionaire? Yeah, it's that. Venture capitalist Mark Andreessen is involved in it, and who's an informal advisor to Donald Trump. We already mentioned Steve Bannon, J.D. Vance. And key is that Vance said that if Trump became president again, what he should do, if I was giving one piece of advice, was fire every mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, and replace them with our people. When the courts stop, you stand before the country and say, the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. That is the quote by Andrew Jackson that led to the Trail of Tears, which was a huge genocide. I'm sorry, I'm starting to stumble over my own words. But what do you expect when you've been going for so long? This is like my 4th attempt at this video, and this is as far as I've gotten. So, what more can I say? Well, rage is sort of what you see happening now, right? Retire all government employees. He's firing a whole bunch of people, right? These are unjust firings, obviously. They're BS firings, and you can't fire everyone, but he's firing so many people that the structure is going to collapse. He's doing this on grounds that he can rehire the people he wants to rehire who are either so desperate they have to take a job that they don't want to do, but they need the job, so they're miserable and therefore not going to resist, or people that are on board with their political ideology who want to come back because they're really big Trump supporters and they want to be part of the project of rebuilding the government in Trump's image. So that's kind of what the scheme here is with Rage. It's to fire everyone that is just normies and bring back either the too weak to resist or the too happy to oppress. Now you've got your new government with all the new workers the way you want it. And if court challenges say no, you tell the courts to go kiss off because you're the executive, you can hire who you want. Except that's not how a government is supposed to work in a democracy. Let's continue. So, Yarvin has also been described as part of the alt-right by journalists and commentators. He's the alt-right's favorite philosophy instructor. He's called a highbrow predecessor and later companion to the transgressive, anti-politically correct metapolitics of nebulous online communities like 4chan and /Pol. Great. In a private message, Yarvin counseled Milo Yiannopoulos, then a reporter at Breitbart News, to deal with neo-Nazis the way some perfectly tailored high communist New York Times reporter, yeah right, handles a herd of greasy anarchist hippies. Patronizing contempt. Your heart is in the right place, young lady. Now get a shower and shave those pits. Views on race, by the way, in case we were wondering. Whites have higher IQs than blacks, according to this madman. He's been described as a modern-day supporter of slavery, a description he disputes. He has claimed, if I can highlight this correctly, that some races are more suited to slavery than others. Gee, I wonder how he feels about his race being enslaved. Probably not pretty good, right? Interesting to note. It should be obvious, although I am not a white nationalist, I am not exactly allergic to the stuff. Yeah. So that's great, right? That's about the gist of him, right? There's a whole bunch more references and whatnot. We're not going to his blogs. Is there anything in the Dark Enlightenment subject that might be worth adding in? Any names that I haven't seen? Well, Nick Land is involved. I don't know who he is, but we'll see. NRX supporters believe in the replacement of modern nation states, democracy, and government bureaucracies by authoritarian city-states. That's weirdly written. Oh, by authoritarian city-states, which on neo-reactionary blogs sounds much like the idealized medieval kingdoms as they do modern enclaves such as Singapore. Well, of course it's little kingdoms. These guys are medieval dukes getting together to elect a king amongst themselves, accountable only to them, overturnable in revolt. You know, House Baratheon gets the throne one week, House Targaryen gets it the next. House Lannister gets it the third. I don't know, man. Like, it's wild. Oh, cool. You can see the letters in my bottle. Gift from a swim client long ago, and it's just stayed good. Things that are built well will last a long time. And this guy, for all he is morally abominable, is absolutely good at building a reactionary movement. So, just keep that in mind, I guess. I don't know what the cat just did. She just sat on my keyboard and then kicked out my leg a bunch. Hope she's okay. She's been weird. Anyway, that's Curtis Yarvin. I'm sorry. Like I said at the top, I'm going to do another dystopian review. I finally figured out how to do music as a review. I'm going to start on that now. That might be the next thing you see out of this channel. I don't know. It depends on if there's any news that really breaks that gets me going. Here's another Ariel the Office cat picture. See her? She's very beautiful. She's made a mess out of my Geeky Gen brand desktopper. So with all that said, I want to thank you all so much for joining us on this little adventure. I hope you've learned something. I don't want to say if you enjoy this video, give it a like, share, subscribe, friend, follow, or whatever. But do if you found it useful. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and as always on this channel, pieces.